Hello and welcome. I'm Darren, and today was the big unveiling of the PlayStation 5 Pro. So, I kind of watched it a bit. I'm going to be completely honest with you. Consoles, not my thing. I was a console gamer for a long time. I don't really keep up with consoles nowadays. I still have an Xbox down there, which admittedly Jack was playing with the other day, like my son. I think it was the Xbox One X, is it? So it's not the Series X, it was whatever it was before that. I was going to buy a Series X, and then I think I just ended up buying. I think I just held off, and then I decided to go PC. So, and then PlayStation wise, I can't remember the last PlayStation I bought. PlayStation 4 maybe? Pro? I did have a Pro PlayStation. Might have been PlayStation 4 Pro, which had like some major overheating problem, I think, if I remember rightly. Where it sounded like a fucking Hoover. Could be. But anyway, regardless. It's kind of not really the... Well, it kind of is the discussion because... I mean, my take on what I watched, and it's hard to say because I'm sure by the end of tonight more will be maybe aware, because I'm sure people will be able to dive a little bit deeper into it and probably get an idea of the hardware that was, well, the hardware changes to the PS5 Pro. But from what I saw, my take on it, it's pretty much down to PSSR, and that's what this video is about, because I'm kind of interested as where that now leaves AMD, and especially as the fact that AMD makes the hardware. So that's an interesting one, and it's good for PlayStation. I don't think that's good for AMD, and it kind of makes me wonder if that ties in with the recent announcement from AMD, or the kind of chat that had gone, or that was public the other day, in respect to AMD backing away from, or certainly for the, which was kind of already leaked information. There was no surprise in that, about AMD backing away from the high end, certainly for the upcoming GPU, or that's kind of what they were trying to say. I don't think it's for the indefinite, which probably makes me think that, the rumors leaked about the 8800 XT probably being the flagship could obviously be true. Price dependent, we'll see. But it kind of made me think that have AMD or have PlayStation put AMD into a bad position, and it kind of makes me like, that is exactly what I am thinking. And it is down to basically the upscaler. Now, obviously, if you've watched any of my content on this channel, for a long time, I've kind of had my say on upscalers and how important I believe upscalers are, and it was kind of whenever the NVIDIA AMD arguments were around, which they're never going to go away, probably my main defense for NVIDIA, and my defense against the people that say it or mention this, because there's a lot of kickback, certainly for those content creators as well, the likes of Daniel Owen, Hardware Unboxed, the people that say, when they're obviously comparing your 7900 XTX against a 4080, or further down the tier, and they'll always say about taking into account DLSS, and I've always kind of agreed with that, and there's a lot of kickback against that. But from my own experience, I think that is a very genuine comment, because it is a problem. FSR is a problem. Now, I'm not saying FSR is a problem in every single game, but it is an advantage that AMD are losing. It is an advantage to NVIDIA. And in some games, it can actually be quite a big advantage. And that led me to, obviously, this PS5 Pro video with the PSSR. Because there are circumstances in games, and this isn't every game, so don't take it on that basis. But obviously, in the PlayStation 5 Pro release, they said, obviously, the advantages on some of these games, or some of the gains and the advantages of the PS5 Pro will be game by game, which clearly makes sense. So there will be certain times, especially at 4K, obviously 4K being the target resolution of the PS5 Pro. So there will be times when there is a bad implementation, or whether it's a bad implementation or if it's just FSR is just bad. But sometimes FSR can be bad, and it can be bad just using it at the upscaler. So even at 100% resolution, having to use it as the anti-aliasing, sometimes it can be quite bad. Now, this could be in a game versus DLSS that could look very good in that game. And you can almost get into a situation where you can drop down to like DLSS balanced, and it can look equally as good as FSR just using its native AA. Now, I'm not saying that that's all the time. That's quite a rare thing, but it will happen. DLSS at balanced mode can look very, very good. Sometimes it's not that far off what it will look like at quality mode. And sometimes even at 4K, FSR falls off a cliff at quality. Like obviously at the moment, I'm playing Black Myth Wukong. I've played through the game. I finished it last night. Now I've played through the game at 4K on this system using FSR. And it's not great in that game, even at 4K. Now at 4K, you're at your best case scenario. If it's bad at 4K, then you're in the shit at any resolution lower than that. So it's not like I'm saying, FSR is bad if you're enabling it at 1080p or 1440p, because DLSS or any upscaler at 1080p is probably not going to be good, because you're going to be using an internal resolution of 720p or below. So 4K is best case scenario to use an upscaler, and you're kind of thinking at least quality upscale at 4K should be good, but that isn't always the case, or it's certainly not always the case in the games that I play with FSR. Now with DLSS, 9 out of 10 times, it's very hard to tell the difference, and it's hard for me to tell the difference on a 27-inch 4K monitor. Now, I've said in the past on a 4K TV, maybe a 50-inch or a 60-inch, 65-inch, whatever size 4K TV it might be. Now, you might notice a difference more, as it won't have, obviously, the same pixel density as what I'm going to have on a 27-inch 4K monitor. So, obviously, the lower the pixel density, the more likely it is that any type of jaggies or anti-aliasing will show up. That's kind of pretty obvious. But then that's the reason why we're at 4K. The reason we're at 4K is because obviously TV screens are getting bigger and bigger. So the bigger the TV screens eventually get, the more need that 4K is no longer a good enough resolution for a huge screen. We're going to need 8K when you're getting to 80-inch TV screens, so on and so forth. So, realistically, FSR, unfortunately, for AMD is the letdown. I can tell you now, without any shadow of a doubt, it is an absolute fact. If this GPU, the 7900 XTX that I have next to me, had DLSS, or if FSR was as good as DLSS, this GPU would be in a different tier. It really does matter. Unfortunately, it does matter. There is no arguing it anymore. There are people that still want to stick to. There's still anti-upscaling people. I see their comments all the time across, YouTube videos. That's fine. If you are adamant that you won't use an upscaler, enjoy 1440p or 1080p gaming, whatever it is. Unfortunately, at 4K, we've now seen that benchmarks are getting released with upscalers because you just don't have a choice anymore. And I don't see that not being the future. And to be fair, for probably NVIDIA users, certainly, I don't want to keep going on about the DLSS versus FSR, but there's no way around it. For NVIDIA users, probably for at least the last year, they probably just use upscalers. They probably don't even blink an eye or think twice about it. I know I certainly don't. If I'm playing a game at 4K, I'm pretty sure I've probably played games recently that I didn't even bother to look what it looked like at native. I just loaded the game up for the first time. It was probably automatically set to quality upscale. A lot of the games are nowadays. I probably just ran it. And I probably thought, you know what, this looks good to me. So I'm happy with that. So watching the PS5 Pro, the small amount of content that you had, there wasn't a great deal to go on. I know obviously it said the three things. So the AI upscaling, the ray tracing, and the larger GPU. Now, I don't know. Obviously, we will find out. People will discuss this. The larger GPU now, is that actually down to a huge increase in cores or your kind of overall performance, or is that down to a larger GPU which is taking on specific AI cores for the upscaler and AI cores or dedicated RT cores? Because obviously ray tracing and an AI upscaler, they are going to take up die space. But it's interesting, the whole AI upscaler, and how I do believe FSR uses a small amount of AI cores, but obviously not in the same realms, certainly not in the same way that DLSS or even XeSS on Intel use. And obviously even XeSS, even Intel use more ray tracing cores, like the NVIDIA GPUs use more ray tracing cores. So NVIDIA and Intel are using a larger amount on their die space of AI cores for their upscalers and dedicated RT cores. So it's kind of interesting how much of a architectural change from your typical AMD hardware has gone from, say, from your kind of your desktop GPUs. If AMD have used a certain ratio of their normal performance cores versus the AI cores and ray tracing cores, it's interesting to see how much the PlayStation APU, whatever you'd like to call it, has maybe changed this. And it kind of makes you think, where does that leave AMD? It's certainly made me think, where does that leave AMD? Because AMD want to target the mid-range, or the talk was targeting mid-range GPU. They can't do that with FSR in its current state, because you're going to have a hard push trying to sell a mid-range GPU around $500 to $600 when you can buy a PlayStation 5 Pro for $600 to $700 as a complete unit, plug it in and play. If at 4K, it actually looks better. Now, I'm not saying that it would have the same performance as, for instance, a $600 or a $500 or $600 GPU. But once you're not using a system overlay, you're not using an FPS counter, you're not kind of checking every single metric there is. When it comes down to it, if you're sat at a desktop and the actual end image was using an upscaler on your 600 or 700 pound GPU doesn't look very good, and there's a load of flickering and there's a load of ghosting and it doesn't look great. But on a PS5 Pro, on your 4K TV, the image looks clean. You're gonna have a hard sell. So I don't think that's gonna ride. I think AMD have put themselves in an awkward position. But at the same time, I think AMD have put themselves in an awkward position with their current hardware, which kind of leads me to believe, and I kind of thought this, and this is just going off my own thinking, but my own thinking, and I mentioned this last time around the rumors of the 8800 XT, will the next GPUs from AMD, due to launch, will they share a similar architectural change to what's just happened with the PlayStation 5 Pro? So are we about to see AMD release a GPU with an AI upscaler? I kind of think we will. Now, that's just my guess. But if I had to put money on it at the moment, I honestly think that hearing the rumors about the 8800 XT and where they want it to fall between, and the big kind of, I think they were talking about like big gains in ray tracing performance. I think they might have kept a little bit quiet about big gains in upscaling performance, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see the new round of AMD GPUs drop with a new upscaler. Now, how that upscaler will work with the last gen GPUs, I don't know, and that is my major concern, because, like I said, the AI or the quality of upscalers does matter. If this GPU tomorrow suddenly had a far superior upscaler, it would make a huge difference. Like, literally, it would be instantly within the same class as NVIDIA. Now, I know it doesn't have the ray tracing performance, but for a lot of people, that's not the biggest problem. A lot of people will argue that FSR is just as good as DLSS. But they're talking out their ass, let's be completely honest. And not until we are in a situation where FSR is as good as DLSS, they will then realise they were talking out of their ass, because they will suddenly say, oh, okay, holy shit, right, now there's a difference. And it is that big a difference. So, yeah, I'm interested to see what PSSR does to AMD, or certainly what PSSR does to FSR. Because I honestly, thinking about it, I just can't see where AMD decide to target mid-range GPUs when you can buy a console at maybe just a bit more. Because I think, what was it, 700? 699 was it for the PlayStation 5 Pro? I mean, it ain't cheap. It is a complete unit. I mean, you're talking, what you paying now, £700. I think £700 I could buy a 7900 XT. But then you need the rest of the PC to run it. Now, the 7900 XT would absolutely destroy it in pure, obviously, graphical power. Don't get me wrong, but you need an entire system on top of that. So there's no denying that £700, if it does look good and you are going to be pushing an upscaled to 4K 60, but the upscaler looks good, then you're going to be hard pushed, I think. I think AMD are almost shitting on their own doorstep, if that makes sense. I think PlayStation have put them in a very, very tricky position, because I've no doubt that Intel were pushing to try and get
Motion detected at the front door.
the PlayStation, to get themselves into the PlayStation hardware. And Intel, whether they could do it as in graphically powerful enough, I don't know. But what they could do, what they could provide, would be the upscaler with XeSS, because they are that much ahead. I'm not going to say they're massively ahead. They're not quite DLSS, but they are ahead of FSR by a big enough margin. And upscalers do make that big a difference. So who knows? It's going to be very interesting to see, and it will all come out very soon. So I will leave it there. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think happens with FSR. Did AMD put themselves in an awkward position? I think they might have. And I would not be surprised if the next round of AMD GPUs launch with an AI upscaler. Well, certainly a more improved AI upscaler. Let me know what you think, and I will catch you all in the next one.